Member Cowichan Valley.
Thank you, Chair. Now I would like to turn our attention to revenue from caribou. The caribou is emblematic animal of Canada. It's also an animal that is well known to be in trouble. In 2002, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada lists the caribou as endangered in Canada, while the BC Conservation Data Centre currently lists it as threatened. Also, 98% of the world's caribou are resident in British Columbia. Would the minister tell the House, and I've heard it referred to as this, how much, and again I'm quoting, how much blood money in the form of a levy applied to oil and gas production in caribou habitat was paid to government in 2012-2013 and 2013-2014? And how much revenue does the minister estimate will be collected from the levy in 2014-15? And would the minister please acknowledge that by applying this levy, the government in a what some would call a perversely odd way is financing the destruction of caribou habitat and the continued decline of the boreal caribou?
Minister.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So in support of the boreal caribou implementation plan, there is a contribution from industry. It's collected through the Oil and Gas Commission. It is approximately $2 million per year. Those funds support research, inventory, rehabilitation work in support of the boreal caribou implementation plan.
Member.
Would the minister tell the House by how much the government financially benefited from what his ministry euphemistically refers to as habitat impact offset charges from coal mining development in the northern caribou habitat in the northeast part of the province in 2012-13, in 2013-14, and how much revenue does the minister estimate will be collected from habitat impact offset charges in 2014-2015?
Minister?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just to make the point that the ministry does not benefit from this. It's the caribou that benefit from this. The money is going to a trust. Those trust is specifically for the benefit and support of the caribou. The Boreal Caribou Implementation Plan. I don't have the specific numbers from that impact offset numbers, but we can undertake to provide those for the two fiscal years that the member opposite referenced.
Member?
I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to communicate that to the caribou, that they're the ones that are benefiting this after all. Anyway, during 2013 estimates debate, we asked the minister, what is the actual number of herds that reached the recovery objective at the time 4 in 2012-2013? The minister followed up with a response on August 12th, 2013 in writing, and I quote, 2012-2013 ministry staff measured 5 herds that had ceased declining. However, we chose a conservative approach and reported 4 herds with stable populations because long-term trends with this species can be difficult to predict and the year-to-year variations are common, unquote. Now, through the Speaker, as I understand it, Cabinet directed or ordered the ministry to recover caribou herds. To define recovery as a herd that has ceased declining seems to me as a layperson to be, instead of jiggery-pokery, I will call it weasel wording. So be consulted. Apparently you consulted leading scientists, or we consulted leading scientists. That's, I've got to get my facts straight here. It's scientists we heard from in the field of biology, and we asked for their views on this, and these biology scientists wrote And scientist number 1 writes, and I quote, "Technically, recovery means that a population has returned to historic levels, which is the definition employed by the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, and I think by the Federal Species at Risk Act. A population that has ceased declining can hardly be said to have recovered," unquote. The same scientist went on to write, and again, I quote, "Population levels invariably fluctuate over time. If by recovery we mean that a caribou population is no longer in decline during time X, then how can we be certain there are enough caribou to prevent a population of them from crashing to zero at some other point in time? The only way to be certain to accomplish this would be to bring a population back to its pre-stress levels. Certainly that's the stated goal of the BC government recovery plan," unquote. Scientist number 2 writes, and I quote, "It is generally accepted a population of any species is recovered when deemed viable and self-sustaining. Essentially, that means sufficiently large effective population, i.e. of reproductive animals, that the likelihood of extinction is nil in the next 100 to 5,000 years. There is a disagreement on the period where some say it would be in perpetuity. So a population that has ceased declining would not be considered recover unless it met other criteria mentioned," unquote. So, again, through you, Mr. Speaker, in light of the possibility that the ministry might be misleading Cabinet in its reporting to the service plans, annual reports, and the number of caribou herds that are in recovery, I have 4 questions for the minister. 1, specifically, which 4 caribou herds does the ministry claim to be in recovery? How does the ministry define recovery? Question 3 is, does the definition of recovery that the ministry uses adhere to generally accepted criteria for recovery? And if the minister is confident in how he is reporting the recovery of caribou herds to the Cabinet and to the public, then perhaps he would commit to having the ministry's number of caribou herds reported to be in recovery assessed for their accuracy by independent third-party scientists.
Minister?
So thank you, Chair. So under the Mountain Caribou Recovery Plan, there were, in 2007 in the plan, there were two objectives set. One was by 2014 to stop decline, and by 2027 to recover to 2,500. These targets were developed, as the member opposite will know, from with input and expert advice from the science team. These are world-leading caribou specialists that have informed those objectives. That team continues to provide the input and oversight in the work of the plan. So, again, two objectives set in 2007, 2014 to stop decline, by 2027 to recover to population of 2,500, and the targets, as I said, were developed with world-leading caribou specialists that are informing the plan and continue to provide the advice through the scientific team.
Member?
Well, thank you for your answer, and Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister, I would like to remind the Minister that because his ministry was perceived, at least by some, to be fumbling the caribou recovery file, Cabinet had to step in and order the Minister to recover caribou herds across the province by 2014. As I understand it, the target was set for the herd recovery by 2014-15 to 14 herds. Now, I've heard something different, so I'll be interested in your response on that. During the 2013 debate last July, the Minister said, and I quote, "I think it is important to set those targets so we keep the focus. Again, the ability to achieve those when we have a very, very complex relationship that's impacting not just the caribou herd, but caribou herds around the province," unquote. Here, Mr. Speaker, the Minister was trying to take the focus, some believe, off of logging as one of the main impacts on the Wells Grey Mountain caribou herds. The Minister talked about the complex relationship with wolves, but the root cause of the decline, as seen by some, was the caribou herds is human impact, and as we understand it, the Minister knows that most people believe that in that region the root cause of caribou herd decline is human impact. For three ecotypes, the caribou in British Columbia, the mountain, the boreal, and the northern, the largest human impacts are timber harvesting and recreational snowmobile use for the mountain ecotype, oil and gas activity of the boreal ecotype, and coal mining for the northern ecotype. Again, Mr. Speaker, in spite of this knowledge, the Ministry gave the public the opinion that that by relying on wolf kills, which is not working, rather than imposing restrictions on industrial development and on the use of snowmobiles, ATVs, or UTVs in the caribou's habitat. Mr. Speaker, would the Minister please tell the House what specific actions he has taken since 2010 to curtail the industrial development and recreational activity in habitat areas for all three ecotypes for the caribou? And would he confirm Canfor's intention to log mountain caribou habitat in its TFL adjacent to Wells Grey Park?
all good TV, man. It's all good TV. Pardon me?
Yeah, we should check the ratings.
I think they are going pretty well.
How many people are watching?
More than a dozen of people watching. You know that. It's a live audience.
The caribou and the wolves.
Where the show Come on. They got there yet. Where the show breaks down, it's these guys. That's where the camera is, and there's nothing going on. You guys here. It's all on you. You gotta do something.
You guys like it because you like that crest.
I know, and
It's
we
all
even,
about the crest.
Crest, we even got the same size.
Yeah, I noticed that those are a new addition.
Well, yours is bigger.
Yeah.
Is it?
The muffins will be next.
I was thinking maybe some carpet outside.
Suggest that. See what happens when you suggest that.
Well, it is, it's a bit boring. Carpet outside. Well,
I'm sure we could find it any better than that.
I think you knew Drake threw out the question.
Here we are.
At least for a while, like.
Well, Tuesday or next week is one of the meetings.
Yeah, we should send in suggestions.
it's pouring rain and then inside.
That never happens. That never happens.
They say that they're coming in, yeah, we just have to bring an umbrella.
Which part of North Vancouver are you? I don't know it very well, but is your
North
part the one with that, where the taxi, the water taxi goes? That's your part?
Are you talking about the two guys?
The Stevens?
The water taxi. Water taxi.
Talking about wolves, wolf management.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to propose a great way to solve the urban deer population problem.
You know, we've had it in, this is true, about 5 kilometers, we have a wolf call, so people are just saying, what are you going to deer? They never do, and we were about 5 kilometers is fine, that's what everyone said, we just gotta.
Just gotta get them together.
Yeah. That, the deer call is the most difficult issue for neighborhood council that they've had for 3 years.
Tough issue.
It's just no,
No easy way to do it.
yeah.
I mean, you could do it with crossbow and bow hunting. And, you could do that, but then, we're got a deer running around with a,
No, John, we don't.
You could do it. You could do it. Good, yeah. Grizzly bear.
We told you bear hunting. Did you talk about that?
Yeah.
I want to get him.
What we talked about the press release that Travis put out, and I cited a study, and we were asserting that they didn't match up. We were asserting science-based when it wasn't there. That was our assertion.
He's still stuck on.
Well, what do you think about it? What's your, what are your views? What vote did you?
No.
Yeah.
We gotta go down here. I know yesterday, today I covered.
Minister?
So, thank you, Chair. We've taken, very significant action in support of the caribou and working towards the caribou recovery plans in the mountain caribou area. 2.2 million hectares of area with no logging, no roads. In the mountain caribou area, we've got 1 million hectares of no sledding. In the Peace Northern caribou region, we've got hundreds of thousands of reserves, 100,000 of hectares of reserves. We can provide you with that exact number in terms of the total number of hectares, but of high elevation reserves. In the Wells Gray area, we have the park, but also over 110,000 hectares of caribou winter range. So across the province, very significant protections in place to provide habitat protection for the caribou herds. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, in response to the specific question around CAN4 intentions in their TFL that the member opposite referenced, we will need to get back to him with that specific information. I don't have that available with me.
Member?
Okay. Excuse me. I'd like to turn now to talk about fish. Excuse me. In 2013 estimates debate last July, the minister told the House that as part of the BC Liberal platform, he was committed to providing the full amount of revenue from fishing and angling license to the Freshwater Fisheries Society. So my question to the minister is, has he honored that commitment?
Minister?
Thank you, Chair. So as was indicated, the government has committed to transferring the balance of the angling license revenue to the Freshwaters Fisheries Society. That commitment was to be by April 2015. Negotiations to formalize the transfer of the funds have been initiated with the Freshwater Fisheries Society BC Executive and our Resource Stewardship Division. We expect that those negotiations to be completed, anticipated in early summer 2014, at which point a decision note will be brought forward to me as the minister to allow for implementation of a new agreement for 2015.